We tend to rag on Sweden, as it were. We tend to hate on Sweden because, again, it's the ultimate example of liberalism run rampant, liberalism gone mad. And I made a video probably 3-4 months ago now called Absolute Proof Liberalism is a Mental Disorder, talking about how some politicians in Sweden, and this is not official government policy yet, but this is what some of them are calling for, the political class, calling for giving ISIS militants, people who fought as terrorists in Syria, welfare and jobs when they return to Sweden. That's what some people in Sweden are actually calling for. And we're going to get into the rest of the madness. But somebody then recommended that I check out this guy's videos, who goes under the moniker The Angry Foreigner. And he put out a video called Welcome to Sweden, which went viral, which got, you know, upwards of 670,000 views. And then I checked out the rest of his video. This really is a great example of somebody who has seen the deception in terms of the fact that in Sweden, it's basically almost a hate crime to even oppose mass immigration. And we're going to get into how people are publicly shamed and harassed and hounded simply for having a different opinion. So, The Angry Foreigner, welcome to the show. Now, before we get into the whole migrant issue, which is what 2 of your recent videos were about, just tell people about your background, because as far as I understand it, you're an immigrant yourself, correct?
Yeah, exactly. I came to Sweden when I was 5 years old in 1993. Me and my family fled the war in the Balkans. It was a very bloody, horrible conflict between Bosnian Muslims and Bosnian Serbs, Orthodox Serbs. So, yeah, we ended up here in a small town. I'm not even sure you can call it a town. Maybe it's more like a village. The population was only 1,000 people there. So it was basically me and a couple of other Bosnian families surrounded by Swedes. And it was, you know, it was great. It was the complete opposite of segregation. And I remember actually that my first day in school, I was terrified. I was freaking out because I was sitting there in the classroom and I didn't know a word of Swedish. So it was like being an alien visiting a foreign planet. And when you're little like that, social acceptance is very, very important. So I made sure to learn Swedish very fast and managed to learn it better than a lot of the students in my class, actually.
So you're an immigrant. You assimilated very quickly. You integrated. You learned the language. So you're there growing up in Sweden. Now you're making these videos critical of immigrants being brought into Sweden. And basically what people want to know, to outline this whole scenario, is, you know, in terms of this cult-like adherence to these leftist policies in Sweden, particularly as it relates to mass immigration, and the drowning out of voices of dissent against that. Because, you know, at least in Britain, we've got the Labour Party, we've got the left who always advocate mass immigration. You know, we voted the Conservatives into power to try and, you know, at least tamp down on that mass immigration to a certain extent. It didn't work. Mass immigration only increased. But at least we've got an acceptance of the fact that criticizing mass immigration is a social issue, it's an economic issue, and simply doing it doesn't automatically make you a racist. At least in many European countries, we still hold to that standard of political discourse. But it seems that in Sweden, even to question the policy of mass uncontrolled immigration is inherently racist and proves that you're a white supremacist or whatever. So what people want to know, as far as I'm concerned, is how bad is it in terms of people who express dissent against this mass immigration policy? How much are they frowned upon? How much are they shamed by the media, by the political class in Sweden?
It's sort of like blacks in the 50s, except nobody is getting lynched. I'm actually surprised that we don't have like diversity lovers only restaurants and toilets and, bus seats, because it's bad. Like, it's ridiculous. And while that was a joke and exaggeration, there's a point to it. Like, you definitely have to think about what you say, because there is the risk of losing friends, and you might even lose your job. I mean, there's certain professions, like if you're a journalist or an academic or a teacher, especially a teacher, you can't criticize mass immigration or multiculturalism. You especially cannot say that the Sweden Democrats have a few valid points. That's like social suicide. But at the same time, we have like 58%, a poll showed that 58% of the population think that immigration is too large. So a large portion of the people are aware that there are problems with our immigration policy. But those people don't necessarily have the balls. So if you were to be vocal, like I've had so many people write me and tell me that they totally agree with what I'm saying, but they don't dare share my videos on Facebook. They don't dare be vocal and public about their opinions because they're afraid of social exclusion. And it's really interesting because there is a strong consensus culture here, and when we think of Orwellian societies where people aren't allowed to speak their minds, we usually think of the presence of a strong military force and like laws punishing people who say certain things. You don't need laws in Sweden because people censor themselves. There's a form of social control instead through taboos and norms, and I would say that the media is largely responsible for this, because for years they have been beating in this, and a politician beating in this notion that immigration is good, immigration is going to serve us all, and you're racist if you think otherwise. So there's lots of people who have discovered my videos and said that, wow, I thought I was the only person who thought like this. And when you get like hundreds of people saying, I thought I was the only person, it becomes kind of ridiculous. It becomes obvious that so many people are living in some kind of bubble of fear. Like they're afraid to speak with their environment, with their surroundings about how they truly feel. So when they discover me, it's like this massive relief for them. And that's pretty bad if you ask me. Also, there's people who genuinely think I'm a Nazi. Like, they seriously believe that I like Hitler. And just as you said, you can't, I mean, if you criticize the immigration policy, people immediately think that it's something personal with the immigrants. Obviously, that isn't the case, because I'm an immigrant and I don't have a problem with immigrants. I have a problem with irresponsible immigration policy, and that's the one single word I would use to describe Sweden's immigration policy: irresponsible.
And you mentioned, peer pressure, and this is what I've found, especially in Europe. I don't think Americans appreciate this to such an extent that they need to, is the fact that, I assume that you're in your 20s or 30s. I'm in my 30s right now, so amongst people in your age group, it's not seen as trendy or kosher or acceptable. Again, as he said, it's seen as a taboo to even hold some of these viewpoints. So the government doesn't really need to censor them. They don't need to be so authoritarian, although there are some examples which we will go on to. But they don't need to be, so crushing in their totalitarianism in terms of censoring these viewpoints, because the sheep will police the other sheep. So if you're around a group of young people who are, Western Europeans, they will generally hold to the beliefs that they were indoctrinated to believe, and they won't dare venture into any of the taboos, which of course is mass immigration. In terms of Sweden, has not been generally successful in practical terms and in social terms. Talk about the housing shortage that is currently taking place in Sweden and how that conflicts with this mass immigration policy.
Right. Well, it's funny because a lot of people say I'm a hypocrite because I came here as a refugee, so how can I deny others the chance? There's a huge difference between the situation today and the situation in the 90s. In the 90s, we actually had room for people. Like there were apartments standing around empty all over Sweden. Now we have a housing shortage so bad. People who've graduated can't move out of their parents' house because there aren't enough apartments. According to the Department of Housing, we need to build 600,000 apartments within the next 11 years to accommodate everyone in need. So basically, we need to build a new Stockholm. We need to build a new capital city, the size of that, in order to accommodate everyone. And it's ridiculous because now we have 1,000 refugees a day coming to Sweden, and they're looking to set up a refugee camp outside of Kristianstad, which is it's close to Malmö. It's down in the south. Basically, there's this massive field, this massive green field that's normally used for things like international scout meetings or military shit. And they're planning on turning that into a refugee camp somehow. They said that it can house up to 40,000 people. So, I mean, that's just insane to me. That's crazy. The guy who is supporting this initiative compared it to a refugee camp in northern Iraq, and I'm like, that's not a good thing. Like that doesn't sound like a good thing. It's crazy.
And another story again. So basically, you've got no room for immigrants again in Germany, Belgium, and other countries. We've seen stories about the poor, the would-be homeless, being kicked out of their homes to house this new influx of migrants that is coming in over the past few months. Basically, you've got housing shortage in Sweden. It's impractical that you could house these people. But we've also got this public shaming angle, which I want to touch on again. We carried an article on InfoWars about a year ago now, which was called Sweden, Immigration Critics Get Home Visits from Thought Police. One of Sweden's biggest newspapers, Expressen, used criminal hackers to break into Discus, which, if you don't know what that is, it's basically a comment system for news articles. We use it on Infowars.com. So they used this hacking group to break into Discus and get the email addresses and identities of commenters online and to reveal the persons behind the nicknames or anonymous user IDs. So then this newspaper actually sent a reporter and a cameraman to these people's homes, these people who had merely criticized mass immigration in Sweden on, internet news articles, and basically publicly shamed them and then put their images, put their video on the newspaper website, on YouTube. So you've got Thought Police actually going out and physically harassing people in Sweden simply for criticizing mass immigration. Now, I know that you use the moniker, the angry foreigner, on your YouTube channel. Is that because the situation in Sweden is so intense, it's so oppressive, that critics of mass immigration could be targeted simply for banal online comments, which aren't racist, which aren't xenophobic, merely drawing attention to the economic and the social impacts of mass immigration? Is that a concern for people in Sweden right now?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a need for the anonymity, I could say. Me personally, I just don't feel like having my window smashed or having shit sent to my mailbox or eggs. So I just want to be comfortable, and I'm not really interested in people knocking on my door, whether it's fans wanting autographs or annoying critics. I just don't want to meet people. When it comes to Expressen, though, you're right. They did, and actually, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but this hacker group that they worked together with are militant left-wingers. They are Antifa. Are you familiar with the organization Antifa?
Yeah, I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, basically it's Antifa evolved into, they used to be Antifa hackers before. So that's their background. And it's insane that nobody is, the only ones criticizing the fact that our mass media is cooperating with left-wing extremists is the alternative media. They're the only ones who did like this huge audit of who these people are. And it's partly, I partly have to defend it because not all of some of those people were politicians, and it was blatantly racist things. It wasn't just sensible criticism. So I can sort of understand wanting to audit politicians and people who are in power. However, they also named and shamed people who aren't politicians, people who simply, someone who owns a company, for example, workers. Another newspaper, Aftonbladet, which is the second, or well, Expressen and Aftonbladet are the two biggest newspapers in Sweden. They did the same thing, and it wasn't even with politicians. They took this guy who wrote like this. It was sort of a funny post. I mean, he basically wrote out a fantasy about how he wanted to murder this fat, annoying, radical feminist who was on Swedish radio. And you could tell that the guy was joking. I mean, he basically laid out this video game scenario
where feminists threaten to kill all men constantly. Yeah. They can get away with it. That's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Because this feminist said some horrible shit, right? But, she's a part of the mass media. She's a part of the establishment. Nobody criticizes her. But yeah, he basically wrote a post about how he wanted to, go to the TV station and kill everyone. And they visited him in his home and tried to make him feel ashamed of having these thoughts. Funny thing about that was that he had no shame. He was just like, well, I'm gonna stand by what I said. It was a joke. You're taking it seriously. You're a fool. That's it. So it didn't really work because that guy had guts. But that's the type of stuff our mass media is doing. And recently, actually, they decided to publicly name and shame a 70-year-old woman with a heart condition because she was writing racist things online. And that's just amazing to me because there is no need for this. They were using the reasoning that democracy feels better this way. If everyone stands for what they say, we're going to have a healthier opinion and debate climate. And I'm like, you wrote an article about her without even addressing a single counter argument to anything she has said. You were literally just trying to scare her into silence.
Welcome to Sweden is his most popular, as far as I've seen. It's got over 670,000 views. It went viral a few months ago, and he's made several English language videos since. We're going to take your calls for the Angry Foreigner at 800-259-9231. That's 800-259-9231. We're talking about Sweden, which again is the ultimate example of rampant liberalism gone mad. They've got a mass open border policy. We're going to talk about the impacts of that. But the Angry Foreigner, as far as I understand, the official in charge of your anti-extremism policy or your anti-Islamophobia policy there in Sweden, this was a top-ranking official. He was so liberal, he was so trendy that he actually went on to join ISIS. Is that correct?
We had what was his title? Did you say?
He was the head of the anti-Islamophobia body.
Yeah. He was. We have a public service debate show called SVT Debatt, and they hired this guy as some kind of expert on Islamophobia, and it's freaking hilarious. This guy was on TV saying that, you shouldn't be prejudiced towards Islam. You think that these guys just have beards and AK-47s. And a couple of years later, he's posing with an AK-47, telling people to join the Islamic State. That's, wow, you can't make that stuff up.
And his name was Michael Nikolai Skramo. But then you had another individual who was basically, he was an expert. This was in your video, Welcome to Sweden. He was some kind of expert on Islamic extremism, and he was talking about the radicals traveling from Sweden to Syria to fight for ISIS. And he said that we can't condemn ISIS. He refused to condemn ISIS even as they were beheading, countless people in the Middle East, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was in my migrant crisis video, actually. And yeah, it was completely insane. Gothenburg alone has produced more jihadists than all of America. Sweden is leading in Scandinavia in ISIS warrior export per capita, so to speak. And yet we have the least legal, like, we have the least legislations against terrorism. It's not illegal to join ISIS here in Sweden. It's not illegal to recruit for ISIS. If the National Security Police suspect that you're going to travel to Syria to join ISIS, all they can do is give you a phone call that you don't even have to like pick up and answer. So it wasn't until April, the spring this year, that Gothenburg assigned someone to firmly and concretely deal with this issue, because this has been going on for like 2 years at that point. And when they interviewed him, as you say, he refused to renounce the Islamic State. He was of the opinion that, oh, it's unnecessary to talk about jihad because, you know, people are traveling for different reasons. Some people traveled to Bosnia in the 90s, and some people traveled to the Finnish Winter War, which was around the time of the Second World War. Excuse me.
We're talking about Sweden, which is a prime case, or some would say a basket case, for what happens when liberalism runs rampant. We were talking about how people within Sweden are not only criticized, but actually hounded by the media, by peer pressure, simply for talking out, simply for speaking out against mass immigration. And I wanted to ask you before we go to calls here, we had the IKEA incident a couple of months ago now. There was some debate about whether that was a beheading or somebody slitting somebody's throat. It was definitely a terror attack by Islamists targeting Swedes in an IKEA store. We've had stabbings, we've had grenade attacks. How bad has it got? I mean, we hear these stories about, these Muslim ghettos where ambulancemen, police, firemen go there to basically just do their job. They're attacked with stones, they're attacked with weapons. How bad have these Muslim ghettos got? How bad has this tension got? Do you see there being riots as there was in Paris a few years ago, arising out of these Muslim ghettos in Sweden? How high has the tension become to the point where there could be some kind of riot or uprising?
Well, I feel I should point out that it is true that we have no-go zones. I think we have 55 no-go zones, and the police chief said, just as you said, that there are certain areas where if the police are following a vehicle and that vehicle travels into a certain neighborhood, they can't follow that vehicle because they will be pelted with rocks. So that's a no-go zone in every sense of the word. They can't go there. But it doesn't really have to do with religion. I mean, this isn't. I don't think you could say that these are Muslims. These are various types of immigrants, and sometimes Swedes, but mostly immigrants in these immigrant-dominated areas who are basically criminals, brats, and I would say that it primarily has to do with ghetto culture. In Sweden, we have immigrants who live in these segregated areas, and they seriously delude themselves into thinking that they have it just as bad as blacks living in Compton, which is ridiculous because, America is worse than Sweden in every way if you look at poverty and class gaps. In Sweden, you don't have to be a criminal in order to survive. You get a pretty nice welfare check here. I've actually read 2 articles interviewing these types of young hoodlums. And one article, they said that they're robbing only Swedish people because they hate Swedes, they hate Swedish society because Swedes are so racist. So robbing them is their way of fighting the man. That was one article. Another article said that, I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud, but basically they were interviewing an immigrant in the ghetto who said that we turn to crime because we don't have enough money to party. So these people are not being criminals out of necessity for life. They're doing it because they're greedy and they watched too much Scarface movies, listened to too much 50 Cent. They just want to be cool, essentially. And we do have Sharia police, but it's not as well established as, say, Britain, where they go around putting up stickers. A couple of months ago, there were these immigrant women who came out in the media and said that they don't feel safe where they live in these segregated ghettos because there's actual Sharia police walking around telling them what to wear.
But I need to talk about the InfoWars store at InfoWarsStore.com, and in particular, Liver Shield. This is an enhanced blend of powerful herbs that support normal cleansing and function of the liver and gallbladder. Now, I'm deathly ill right now. I'm plowing through the show, even though I've got, man flu. But I'm actually glad that I got it this week, because next week I'm going to go to Austin. I'm flying to Austin, and I'm going to grab as many of these health products as I can, because as you can see from the website, InfoWarsStore.com, the independent reviews are overwhelmingly positive, and that's, it's not us saying it. It's independent reviews, people who have got these products, they've worked for them, and they're really having massive benefits. I need to get my hands on the Knockout, because I've been taking melatonin, which has been hit and miss. So I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on these health products, which have got rave reviews at InfoWarsStore.com, including Liver Shield, which is currently on sale, $29.95. That's reduced from $39.95 again. Didn't plug these products last hour, but this is crucial to support what we're doing, because we're not funded by George Soros. We're not funded by massive, giant pharmaceutical companies. We're funded by the listeners, by the people who buy these products, and these products work for them, which is proven by these independent third-party reviews, and you can see them all on the website at InfoWarsStore.com. But we're talking to the Angry Foreigner. That's the moniker he goes by on YouTube. He's had several viral video hits. He's an immigrant, a Bosnian immigrant that moved to Sweden and is now experiencing the joys, the benefits of mass immigration. And again, to make that distinction, not immigrants who move there to work hard, to integrate, to assimilate, to learn the language, to contribute something to society, which is, he's a perfect example of that, but to the people who are being used, for example, with this migrant crisis, as a gravy train to dilute people's rights, to dilute social cohesion. So the EU bureaucracy, which is supported by many European governments, can take hold and can really federalize to an increasing extent and have people become more dependent on government, because there's such a lack of cohesion, a lack of a sense of community, that big government takes its place. And we're going to go to your calls now. First up, Angelo in New York. Angelo, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hey, Paul Joseph Watson, the Angry Foreigner. Paisan, how are you?
Hey, what's going on?
I want to say congratulations to you, the Angry Foreigner, because it takes a lot of courage to do what you're doing. And I understand that immigration is an important topic, and it's important to you. And Planned Parenthood is a similar topic that I felt similar to. Once I realized, and I did the research, that the fetus reacts to sound, it outraged me that people were just, Planned Parenthood was chopping up babies. I mean, that was just horrible. And I went out and I spoke out against it, against Planned Parenthood in my neighborhood. And I put the video up on Facebook. And I got a call from a few friends of mine. Mr. Angelo, are you okay? I mean, is everything okay? And I'm like, yeah, everything is fine. Why? Oh, you made that Planned Parenthood video. Oh, is everything okay? You sure? I'm like, dude, they're chopping up babies, man. I mean, don't you feel, is there anything that you feel strong about? Is there anything? So,
no, I mean, just to jump in, this is what I've found the difference between, quote, liberals and conservatives, or liberals and libertarians. So conservatives and libertarians will be happy to make friends with and to be polite and pleasant towards people with whom they disagree, even if it's on fundamental issues like abortion. But then as a libertarian or as a conservative, if you kind of venture out into the public commons and dare express your views, which other people might disagree with, It isn't a case where, oh, that's okay, we disagree, we can have a debate about it, but then we can come together as friends and, you know, break bread and still remain friends. But with liberals, it seems like if you do that, they ostracize you instantly. It's kind of an immediate backlash, which is what you were talking about in Sweden earlier. You were talking about the peer pressure where people will instantly just lash out and ostracize you from a social group if you dare to even express any kind of skepticism towards their beliefs. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it's interesting, you know, that's exactly it. And I personally, I consider myself to be a left-winger. I just want to be clear with that. Like, I'm pro high taxes, free healthcare, free, you know, free schooling, all that shit. But I have noticed that people on the left are way more narrow-minded than the opposite, than the other way around. And there's been some experiments on this. I don't remember the names of those who did the experiment, but a right-wing journalist in Sweden wrote about this, and he said basically that they investigated how well people can put themselves in their opponent's shoes, argument-wise. And it turned out that left-wingers genuinely believe that people to the right have bad intentions. Like, they believe that they hate poor people, not that they just want to help them differently. And, you know, they just can't understand that people can have good intentions and, you know, the same goals, but completely different methods in going about to get to those goals. So there's definitely something to that.
Right. And you call yourself a left-winger, but again, it's the fact that so-called progressives have become so authoritarian and so overreaching that left-wingers, classical liberals, now have to go to the lengths to differentiate themselves from these, quote, progressives, because they actually believe in free speech. And though they may disagree with conservatives on certain issues, they're willing to have a dialogue, to have a debate, and not immediately react with horror and backlash and try to censor their ideological opponent. So that's, again, an important distinction to make. Obviously, you describe yourself as a left-winger. You're obviously a classical liberal with some views that contradict progressives, but now you're being, you know, placed under skepticism, under review by progressives because of what you say about mass immigration. Santino in California, you're on the air. Go ahead, Santino.
Yes. My question to the angry foreigner is that the majority of the Sunni people, the Sunni Syrian refugees, the majority of the refugees from Syria that are coming to the West, the majority of them are mostly Sunnis who are fleeing prosecution from Assad. And the majority of the women who are coming that are Sunni are also fleeing prosecution because their sons ended up joining ISIS. Their sons ended up getting sniped, and Assad found out where they live. Now they have to come here. So basically, they're going to bring their rhetoric here. They're going to bring every of their rhetoric thoughts. These people are takfiris. These people want to come here, say Allahu Akbar, and blow themselves up. These people are not real Muslims. I am a Shia Muslim. I smoke cigarettes. I like to drink whiskey. I like to eat pork. I'm a moderate Muslim. These people are not moderate Muslims. If they come here, it is not going to be good, and it's not going to be in our best interest to let these people here. And that's all I have to say.
Before I go to the angry foreigner, the figures show that only 1 in 5 of these, quote, refugees coming to Europe are Syrian refugees. So it's 1 in 5. The other 4 in 5 are coming from Afghanistan. They're coming from Northern Africa. And that's an important point to make because we've been presented with this narrative by the media that the vast majority of them are Syrian refugees fleeing ISIS. That's not the case. 4/5 of them on, 72% of them are men, only 15% and 13% women and children. But angry foreigner, your response to the caller?
Well, he doesn't ask any question, did he?
No, I think he was trying to make the distinction between moderate and extremist Muslims, but I don't think you can make that distinction between, you know, Shia and Sunni. I mean, I've got a very good friend that is a Sunni Muslim. She's by no means an extremist Muslim, so I don't think that's the distinction that we have to make, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I don't make a distinction between Shia and Sunni like that. I make a distinction between moderate Muslims who want to live in a secular society and just various types of fundamentalists and radicals. The worst kind is Wahhabists. That's the ideology that Al Qaeda and Islamic State is based on. And I mean, if you take a moderate Wahhabist, you have the Saudi Arabia. Like a moderate Wahhabist isn't going to cut your head off, but he's going to sit there and go like, oh, well, yeah, I think it's good if we stone cheating women to death. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Let's have that as a rule. Like that's a moderate Wahhabist. A radical Wahhabist is the Islamic State. So I rather use those terms instead.
Daniel in Wyoming, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hey, what do you call it? First of all, I wanted to say that you both sound like racists, and you should find the nearest minority and gut yourself so they can start feeding on your entrails.
Okay, are you an actual troll, or are you being serious right now?
Nah, PJW, I'm just messing around right now. But, but what I wanted to ask was, the angry foreigner, was we see these like rape statistics about Sweden because I've been seeing this whole Europe Islamization thing happen for a couple of years. And
before the break, we had a caller who brought up the Swedish rape epidemic. Now, this is something that I've wrote about, made videos about on several occasions. Basically, last year, the Swedish Prime Minister unveiled, the new Swedish Prime Minister, the leftist, unveiled what he called a feminist government. Those were his words. And yet at the same time, they're importing a deluge of Muslim immigrants, predominantly Muslim immigrants, who treat women as second-class citizens. But there's a debate over whether this 1,400% increase in rapes since Sweden opened its doors to mass immigration back in the 70s is a result of Sweden expanding its terms for what is defined as rape, or if it's purely due to the fact that they've got these waves of Muslims emigrating to the country who do treat women as second-class citizens, who are inclined as part of their culture as treating women as inferior to rape more women. Now, if you look at the situation in the migrant camps in Germany, a number of women's organizations in Germany have raised the alarm to the fact that children and women are being raped in these migrant camps. And the media and the police authorities in Germany are covering up the details of those incidents for months so as to not give legitimacy, and these were their own words, to not give legitimacy to, quote, right-wing protesters who are anti-immigration, who are anti this mass migrant wave. So the angry foreigner, the caller brought up the point of this rape epidemic in Sweden. People are now calling Sweden the rape capital of Europe. What is the truth between the left, who argue that it's only increased to such an extent because they've redefined the terms, compared to the right, which points out the fact that, you know, 72% of these perpetrators are identified as foreigners, that this is part of this male Muslim culture? What is the truth in that distinction with this 1,400% rape increase in Sweden?
Well, both have a point. I mean, it is true that Sweden has a very generous definition of rape and also a generous way of counting statistics. For example, if a woman is raped 300 times by the same man, we will count that as 300 rapes instead of one rape, which they will do in other countries. So you can't actually compare rape statistics internationally. But it is also true that immigrants are overrepresented when it comes to rape. For example, if you look at the court verdicts from 2010, little more than half of all the rapes were done by immigrants. And that is absurd, considering that 15% of our population is born outside of Sweden. If you count immigrants and their children, if you count second generation, like, for instance, children who have at least one parent who is an immigrant who is born outside of Sweden, then the immigrant population becomes 30%. So to think that you have a minority of 30% who are responsible for more than half the rapes in the country is pretty absurd. So there is, both sides have some truth to them, I would say.
So, you know, they they try and extend this definition of rape. I mean, we had a story on Infowars.com a couple of weeks ago where in American colleges, calling someone a slut is defined as an act of sexual violence. And, you know, the left in many cases will use that to impugn, you know, college goers in America as all would-be potential rapists. But then they use the same expanded definition to kind of absolve the blame when it comes to Muslim migrant rape in Sweden. So again, they you know, it's parsing the terms on the fact that they introduce these expanded definitions, but then they use them in different contexts to either blame in one case or absolve people of rape. So it's an interesting conundrum. But as you said, the simple mathematics of it. And again, I know facts are racist, you know, God forbid I would bring up facts and mathematics, but the Muslim population, the migrant population in Sweden, the fact that they're responsible for over 50% of rapes, as you said, compared to their population, suggests that there is a problem, right?
I wouldn't necessarily say that they're Muslims. I have no idea what religion they are, but there are certain countries are overrepresented in Africa and the Middle East.
But he's faced some flack, as anyone would, in Sweden for opposing the policy of mass immigration. We're going to go to more of your calls in a second. But first, I wanted to ask you, the Sweden Democrats, which are, as far as I know, considered conservative, considered right-wing in Sweden, they're currently surging in the polls. So whereas we get this portrayal of Sweden as this, you know, liberal, extremist liberal, even backwater, the conservative opposition to these mass immigration policies are currently enjoying significant success in the polls. So is there likely to be a legitimate backlash against this with people voting out the government? Or is, as you mentioned before, the peer pressure, the social taboo of opposing this likely to hold sway? Or is there going to be a conservative backlash against these immigration policies in Sweden?
The Sweden Democrats are social conservatives, and I believe that they will become the biggest party in the future because, you know, you don't have to say what party you vote for. So there is no, the peer pressure doesn't really apply there. And I definitely think it's some kind of backlash. I mean, people are tired of multiculturalism. Like, nobody's against influences from other cultures. Like, you know, taking a foreign aspect of a different culture and incorporating it into your own. People like that. That's why we have meatballs in Sweden. That's why we have pizza. So that's not a problem. But that's not multiculturalism. That doesn't even have a name. I mean, that's just what happens in reality. Cultures evolve through time. Multiculturalism is engineered by politicians and forced onto the people. I have a perfect example of that. We have a debate show here on public service media. Every week they do an episode about current events. And a while back we actually had people discuss on primetime television whether or not we should allow gender-segregated bath halls in the name of Allah, because there were these Muslim, Arab, and African women sitting there saying that, oh, we can't bathe in the presence of men. That's against our culture. That's against our religion. And it's like, if you need to have an argument about it, if you need to discuss whether we should have a change towards this direction, that's not natural. That is forced by someone else. And we've had several cases over the years where Muslims show up to their workplace. These are fundamentalists, not moderates. They show up to their workplace and they refuse to shake hands with female coworkers or even their boss because she's a woman. And the employer tells them that they need to adapt. They need to shake hands. They need to be able to greet people. But the Muslims get offended. So they sue them for discrimination and get thousands of crowns in damages. Because the court's reasoning is that in a multicultural society, you need to be able to greet in more than one way. And that's ridiculous. I mean, most people think that's ridiculous. Most people think that you should adapt to the country that you come to because that's just common sense. That's common courtesy. And most people want to live in Sweden. They don't want to live in Afghanistan. So yeah, I think definitely it's a backlash. I mean, we're accepting way more immigrants than we can handle. When I got here in 1990, there was 3 ghettos in Sweden. In 2012, there were 186. Our society has not been going towards a good direction. we're taking people in, but we're not taking care of them. Our system is guaranteed to put people into segregation and guaranteed to cause bad integration, because you can't have a massive immigration the size of ours and then expect people to mix together. What's going to happen is that they're going to end up in these areas where there's cheap housing, and they're going to stay in those areas, and they're not going to have a reason to learn Swedish because there's mostly immigrants in that area, and Swedish is not a natural part of your everyday life in that neighborhood. People go around in certain areas just talking Arab. So obviously things have failed.
Yeah, and I mean, even Merkel and Cameron admitted that a few years ago, that multiculturalism has failed, because it's not about gradual migration. As you said, I think in one of your videos, if we accepted these people, if we had time to assimilate them in relatively low numbers, then it could be a success. We could embrace the positive aspects of their culture. We could embrace, the diversity that is positive, the food, for example, as you mentioned. But that's not what's happening. It's a wave, and these people are not assimilating. They're not speaking the language, large numbers of them, and they're actually causing problems for the immigrants who do make the effort to learn the language, to integrate, to get jobs, as you have done. And so that's part of the problem. But why do you think that European governments, and especially Germany and Sweden, are basically rolling out the red carpet? Surely it's not because of their humanitarian virtues, right? There must be a larger political agenda as to why they're allowing these migrants to flood the country in such large numbers.
Yeah, I don't know why. There are certain theories, but I absolutely do not believe this has anything to do with humanitarianism. Because, I mean, if you look at it, the majority of refugees are stuck in the Middle East. There's it's 5% of all refugees that manage to come to Sweden, and those are the ones that have the money to smuggle themselves north. So you're not helping the most amount of people by accepting 5% of people. So there's something else to it. Germany, I've been told, needs cheap labor. So basically they're importing workforce right now, according to my understanding. Sweden, on the other hand, is a bit weirder. I don't understand that. I've heard politicians say that, oh, well, in the future, we need people who can take care of our elderly. So they think that they're importing workforce, when statistics show that, 80% of Somalians don't have jobs.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The figures that I read, 58% of welfare payments in Sweden go to immigrants. So it's not as if they're filling jobs that Swedes don't want to do, because they're getting most of the welfare payments.
Mm-hmm. And after 7 years, around half of immigrants don't have jobs. So the integration into the work market is terrible. I have no idea what's going on here. I heard another theory, which was quite interesting, is that, and I'm very bad at economics, so I can't investigate this really, but the guy was basically saying that importing a massive amount of people like this is a way to avoid a financial collapse. Because you're basically trying to, you're importing people that you can put into debt, so you can avoid inflation or something to that extent. There's a number of theories, but I absolutely do not think that these psychopaths in our parliament are being nice. That's the last thing I would guess.
TJ in Minnesota, you're on the air with the Angry Foreigner. TJ, go ahead.
Yes, sir, Brother British Watson and Mr. Sweden there. I would like to give you my credentials in the Middle East that were high enough for diplomatic immunity in the 1990s, but I'm not going to do that because your call receiver said I have to form it into a question. But I think both of you gentlemen are headed for a 10x target bullseye. And I know that there are three monotheistic religions: Islam, Christianity, and Jewish faith. And they better hang together or hang separately. And I know much about the prayerfulness and the God-fearingness of true Muslim leaders of many Middle East countries. But I have a question. And the question is this: and it only formed at noon today. Putin, nobody hates Nazis like the Russians. And apparently, according to mainstream propagandist news, I don't know if you've heard it yet, but he's taken out by aircraft and whatever right now in Syria. He's taken out El Qaeda. He's taking out ISIS, ISIL, and whatever form you want to put that UN-US diabolical demon in words with. And apparently it has happened. Are you guys aware of this, sirs?
Yeah, we posted that up on Infowars.com earlier. Russia has begun airstrikes in Syria against ISIS targets. And of course, for 3 years, the Obama administration has been arming these, quote, moderate rebels in Syria, who in many cases go on to hand their weapons over to ISIS, in other cases defect to ISIS. But then Russia and Putin, he's suddenly the bad guy for actually wanting to move tanks, wanting to fly aircraft over Syria to actually target these ISIS terrorists. Then you have Turkey, our supposed allies, bombing the Kurds who are fighting ISIS. You have Saudi Arabia coming out and saying that they're going to threaten the military option in Syria unless Assad steps down, again siding with ISIS. They want to overthrow Assad. And this was the very origin, this was the very cause of the migrant crisis in the first place, which is now impacting Germany and Sweden. The Angry Foreigner, your comments on that?
Yeah, that's something that really annoys me about the whole debate, especially in the media and the political debate, is that everybody is talking about right now. We need to take in a bunch of refugees right now, when nobody's talking about why these people are running to begin with, like what caused this crisis. It's basically irresponsible politics. It's us voting for politicians that contribute to wars. You know, Sweden's government has also financially supported terrorists. I mean, we supported Al-Qaeda allies. The Syrian Recovery Trust Fund are allied with Al-Qaeda, tactically allied, and we gave them several millions. So, you know, I think it's short-sighted and one-sided that nobody's thinking about the future, like how we're going to take care of these people, and nobody's thinking of, well, how did we get to this situation, the past. They're just thinking right now we need to import people, and that's really bad. There is no nuance whatsoever in the public debate.
Okay, we've got another guest coming up, but Angry Foreigner, I just wanted to give you the opportunity here in the final few minutes to tell people about your YouTube channel, how they can subscribe to that, how they can get further information about your videos.
Yeah, well, just go on YouTube and type in Angry Foreigner, and you're going to see my channel. And just click subscribe. I'm going to be making a lot more English videos. My next video is going to be pretty long, 50 minutes. It's going to be about the Islamization of Sweden. And I also got a video coming tomorrow about how we choose to keep rapists but deport people, immigrants who actually have a job. So there's a lot to look forward to.
Okay, the Angry Foreigner, thanks for joining us on the Alex Jones Show. We'll be sure to check out your channel for future updates. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
For all of recorded history, civilizations around the world praised the health benefits of silver. At InfoWars Life, our mission is to bring you the highest quality, purest, cleanest, effective colloidal silver on the market today for the lowest price available. You don't have to be a doctor to know. The fall and winter months are the most dangerous time of year in North America when it comes to you and your family's health. InfoWarsLife.com is very excited to announce our biggest run yet of Silver Bullet colloidal silver, exclusively available at InfoWarsLife.com. Now, InfoWarsLife.com has taken colloidal silver to the next level using a cutting-edge technique that is free of toxic artificial additives. Now more than ever, it's important to stock up on high-quality Silver Bullet from InfoWarsLife.com and to help others during Christmas by teaching them about the powerful benefits of silver. Secure your Silver Bullet today at InfoWarsLife.com or by calling toll-free 888-253-3139.